So, about a month ago, I made a video. It wasn't a groundbreaking video, it was just basically me moaning about what had happened in Abu Dhabi. But I'd needed to get my thoughts out so that I could actually go to bed. And it turned out that quite a few people watched that video and quite a few people agreed with me and seemed to think that I was talking sense. And, well, that's probably one of the first times that that's happened, so I thought I'd jump on it and really sort of come back a month and a half on and see if my opinions had changed or if I've got any new perspectives after the conversations that I've had. I've been hanging around in the Twitter spaces with other fans a lot more since then, and it's been really great to talk to other fans and find out what their thoughts are and what their kind of investigations, as it were, have kind of come up with. So yeah, I wanted to see where I'm at and if anything has changed since December. So, in terms of how I feel about the race, I'm still mad, if I'm honest. I'm mad because the whole conversation about the midfield people have had conversations about the midfield, but I don't feel like it's still very centred on the championship battle, and I think there should be a priority towards that conversation. The outcome of the championship being considered to be manipulated or in some way tarnished, that is the priority, but I do think that we need to have a portion of the discussion on the midfield as well. Initially, in the video previously, I talked a lot about Carlos and how unfair he was treated by Michael Massey and the race officials, but that sort of evolved into a more blanket outrage for the entire, I would say, like the entire of the 7 lapped cars, the 5 being the ones that got to unlap themselves and the 2 that were stuck behind Max. When we restarted the race, in reality the race was only ever restarted for Max and Lewis. The 5 cars that had unlapped themselves were essentially in no man's land on the other side of the track. They weren't green, they weren't racing. And again, the 2 behind Max, Ricciardo and Stroll, they'd taken the risk to change onto new tyres, and they were, they couldn't fight for position like in the way that Max was able to, because the other guys were half a track away. So yeah, the midfield grievances are still very, very present, and I'm a bit I'm still confused as to why this wasn't raised, particularly by McLaren, Ferrari and Aston Martin. It affected them a lot. I know Fernando was in that first 5, but there was a lot of things going wrong there that I think needed to be questioned, and it's almost like the other teams have kept quiet, bit sort of bystandery. So yeah, not 100% happy about that. Something that comes up quite a lot in the spaces and online that I've seen is the deserving debate. I am not a fan of this. Max and Lewis both deserved that championship. The outcome of that race, I would have been more than happy, comfortable, pleased, whatever the word is, with whoever won that race and won the championship, because they went into the last race on equal points, and equal points doesn't mean this guy deserves more. This guy doesn't deserve to win because he won less. Because if winning is the only thing that's important, then why do we give points for 2nd, 3rd, 4th, etc.? Yeah, Max won more, Lewis was more consistent in the point scoring positions. They both deserve to be there. The thing that gets me more is that, Max now essentially has a tainted championship. And I feel quite bad for him for that, because I had a conversation with someone at work the other week and we were talking about, Max won the championship, and the response was, but did he? And I feel like that question's always going to hang over 2021, in that if we had finished more sort of in line with the consistent rules for a safety car, so if we'd finished under the safety car, I don't think we'd still be having this conversation. I don't think it would have gone on for as long as it did. It would have just, that's how it was, because that's the rules, and that's, you know, I don't think it's fair almost for Max to be able to, his first championship is kind of almost been taken away from him a little bit. And if that had happened, if it had happened the other way around, you know, if it was, his first championship has been tainted, and yeah, it doesn't sit nicely for me. I'm not a fan of Max particularly, like sort of as a person, but you know, I've got a lot of respect for both of the championship contenders. You know, Lewis is up there. Max is, his drive to win is insane, man. Like he wants that trophy, and I respect that. I think there's always going to be a part of that championship that people doubt. You know, it's quite similar to 1994 and the Schumacher Hill contest that ended in the crash. And you know, I'm no better than this, because I like that to me is a tainted championship. I'm not a Schumacher fan, I was a Hill fan. I felt like, you know, that maybe Damon, if you were on the track and you got to fight it out, maybe he could have done it. Schumacher made a mistake, he went off track, he came back on. But we'll never know if, without the kind of the constrictions of a crash and in this case the regulations being changed, whether or not on track would have been different. The other thing that I want to talk about is Lewis's silence, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I sort of the Formula One press, I don't know, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the Formula One press. I think it is a very, sometimes it's great and sometimes it's sensationalist claptrap. I have very much enjoyed the fact that there's been no news from Lewis. There have been no updates, so kind of watching them break their necks to report nothing, that's been a delight, if I'm honest. The only people that I think need to know what's happening are Mercedes, Lewis, and you know, the people that are around him. As far as the FIA are concerned, he is a classified entry for 2022, and until that changes, then they can just wait and see, can't they? I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but if we can put George into a Mercedes 3 days before a race, then they can, if Lewis did decide to leave, they could put Nick de Vries in the Mercedes. You know, there are options, and I think the longer that Lewis goes on sort of keeping this information to himself, then, you know, the more powerful he becomes. I keep needing to caveat these opinions by just reiterating, I'm not a Lewis fan. I'm not a Max fan. I don't have a foot in either camp. I'm just on the hillside watching the battle happen in the valley. I'm in the midfield. I'm at the back. So, you know, I don't really have a kind of a stake or a claim in anything. So, you know, I think what he's done so far is the best thing to have been done. It's not what Formula One is used to. They're used to having the statements and the sensations and the headlines, and they don't know what to do. It's actually quite funny. So how do I think it should have ended? Personally, and I was talking to some people about this yesterday, I think it was going to end under a safety car. I think Michael Massey had decided that the race was going to continue to the end under the safety car, and that is why his first sort of radio communication was that the lapped cars would not be overtaken and rejoining. because what would be the point? Why would you send the lapped cars to the back to sort of reorder themselves if there was no point to it? There isn't. So my sort of understanding is that the muscle memory kicked in and Michael Massey went with standard safety car procedure. They weren't going to be able to get Latifi's car completely out of the way in time. The barrier could be damaged by what had happened, so they were just going to run until the end. What we talked about was that there is this sort of this 4 minutes of unknown discussion that happens in this room where the officials and Michael Massey are, where something has changed. Someone's opinion has altered. It's changed how they're approaching the race, how they're approaching the safety car. It's very sort of Alexander Hamilton-esque, you want to be in the room where it happened because nobody has any clue why. And it does feel a lot like Michael Massey's hand was forced in a different direction to what he'd originally planned. And then, why did that happen? Who was the person that decided that? Why wasn't he getting back up? And why didn't he have the authority to just say no? There's sometimes the FIA and Formula One behave a little bit like the Masons. There's a high likelihood that somewhere down the line they've had their own handshake, and they behave in a way that kind of insinuates that people within its kind of core have a lot more power than people realise, and people that perhaps that you wouldn't expect to have power in these situations can just make a phone call and say, no, this is what's happening. And that's a concern. I'm not saying for definite that's what's happened, but strange things are happening in Formula One at the moment, so anything's possible, really. I think there was, at the time, I think I was quite in favour of a red flag. Since then, I've changed my mind on that. I think that it didn't warrant a red flag. Under the safety car, I suppose they were able to look at the barrier and see that it didn't need a repair job. So in that situation, it is a safety car until the incident is cleared. In terms of the Mercedes strategy, again, I've seen a lot of people talking about how, it's Mercedes have let Lewis down because they didn't pit him, they should have pitted him. I am fairly confident that if Lewis had pitted, then the Red Bull wouldn't have. And this is very, very my personal opinion based on what I've seen. Please don't lynch me. I think Max Verstappen is a lot more difficult to get past. Actually, no, not a lot more difficult to get past. He is more difficult to get past than Lewis. Like I've mentioned before, like his drive and determination to win. I don't doubt that Lewis has the same determination to win, but I think his risk-taking is smaller than Max. Like, Max is more willing to put something on the line for that win and kind of not be really sort of bothered about the possible consequences. And I know that the FIA put in not even a clause, like they put in a threat before the race that, if you cause a collision, then we're going to take points off you, because everyone was expecting that Senna, Prost taking each other out and taking the championship kind of thing. But I think it was a bit more nuanced than that. Like if you're on the last lap of a 50-odd lap race and you're defending on older rubber and you come together with someone, like the lines are a lot more blurred. It would be a lot more difficult to justify taking the points away if it was a sort of general, a genuine racing incident. Where do you draw that line? Who gets to decide that? I feel like that's above the heads of the stewards, particularly this year, because their calls haven't been fantastic either. So I think the thing that the thing that's made the sort of the biggest change in my mind has been talking to people about Michael Massey and seeing the real aggravation that people have towards him. And that to me has softened me a little bit more on Michael. I think my empathy has kicked in and I feel bad for the guy. I really genuinely feel bad for him. I think what has happened is that this is Michael Massey's job. He is employed by the FIA. He is an employee. He has made a mistake at work. Now, I've made mistakes at work. I mean, I lost £1,000 of my company's money once and thought I was going to lose my job, and it was quite traumatic because I was quite young. But in reality, what is the difference between those two scenarios? We both made a mistake at work that had consequences for the organisation. And I think the thing that the fans need to do, and I'm not telling anyone what to do, this is what I think we should do. We need to separate the professional misdemeanour from the man and really sort of pressure the FIA to make the right decisions in making these, you know, the consequences being appropriate to what's happened, rather than going after the guy. Like Michael Massey, regardless of whether he comes back next season or not, his life isn't going to be the same. He is always going to be remembered for this. And a man's life shouldn't be ruined for a decision in sport. Like, it's unfortunate, and I know that if this was one of my drivers, that I would be like horrified. And you know, if look at what happened in Monza last year, 2020, sorry. I was in a bad mood for a month after, you know, Carlos didn't get the win in Monza, and it wasn't even anyone's fault, but I didn't go after Pierre Gasly and kind of like, you know, I had opinions on how the strategy had played out, and, you know, red flags and everything, but I didn't go after anyone for it. And I think, you know, you really have to put in that definition between this being a man who made a mistake at work. Yes, it was an absolute clanger, and he definitely needs to be treated appropriately for what's happened. But I think, you know, as a human, I think some fans are going too far, and that's not on. You know, if he is reprimanded in line with the crime, then that's what we can hope for, and you know, we have to move on from that. And the other thing is, like, who would actually replace him? I don't think there is anyone who is in a position to be able to do that. You know, when Charlie Whiting sadly passed away in Australia, I mean, Michael Massey's Australian, he was there. He was pulled in as a kind of, I know that there was already a transition plan, and that it wasn't, you know, Charlie wasn't going to be around forever, but it was a very knee-jerk reaction to that really sorry situation, and you know, he's then stuck around. But from my perspective, it was quite clear that he was struggling. You know, he wasn't making solid decisions. There were some real problematic decisions that were being made. Stroll out unlapping himself while there was a marshal on the track. There's been cars at race speed when there's been cranes on track. The decision not to red flag the third qualifying session at Spa, when clearly it was a lake. You know, I feel like it was clear that he was struggling, and it makes me wonder whether or not he was asking for support and not getting it. Because for them to then turn around and put someone in there, the FIA then has to admit that they've been wrong, or that they are not getting it right. And I don't feel like they're the kind of organisation that want to do that. You know, when we get a resolution, whatever that looks like, I think the FIA are going to be there sort of saying, you know, look what we did. Look how we fixed this. You know, say thank you because we fixed this for you. And I feel like Michael Massey's going to be the guy that ends up under the wheels of the parade truck. You know, he's going to be the one that takes the fall for it. He'll be the scapegoat. Having said that, if there is no one to replace him, you end up with the scapegoat still in the position, which is, I don't see how that can work, because the FIA won't take the blame. Michael Massey will have to take the blame, but he'll still be there. So that's going to be really interesting. I think, you know, that's going to be a question that will hang around until the start of the season, until we see what happens with that. So really, how do we move on? And the honest answer to that, I think, is that sometimes we don't. I think this is going to be something that's going to hang around for a very long time. Like I was mentioning earlier with 1994, I know from experience that when something happens in a race that is controversial and it hurts people, that hangs around. Like, it's not, I'm still annoyed about 1994, and I didn't even watch that season. You know, this is going to be something that will live on, and the fans are going to hold on to it, and they should, because if you think about it, that's what will drive the changes, because fans don't want to see this happen again, because this is unacceptable. You know, I don't want this to become something that defines the sport, because at the end of the day it turns it into a circus. And when you think about it, there are drivers in the lower formulas that are literally putting their lives on the line. You know, W Series, broken necks. You know, we lost Antoine Hubert, and the only reason that these people are in these cars in the lower formulas is because they are trying their hardest to get to the pinnacle of the sport, which is Formula One. And for what, if it's just going to be a joke? Why would people be dying for a joke? That's not acceptable at all. So, you know, you can't have this. You also can't afford to have future championships tainted with this same mark. You know, that's not fair on them. You need to make sure that you're resolving this by having clear and consistent regulations, clear and consistent stewarding. You know, Formula One teams are the worst. Team bosses, race engineers, they're velociraptors from Jurassic Park. They're trying the fences. They want to find the loopholes so that they can take that tiny advantage and turn it into a win. And if you can do your best to take every possible hole out of that fence, the velociraptors have no choice but to play the game. And I think that's what we have to have. You know, we have to have all the velociraptors on the same playing field. This has turned into a terrible analogy, and I can only apologise. So yeah, this is kind of where I'm at now. I don't know, maybe in a month and a half's time, again, before the season starts, we'll see what happens, and I'll do another video. But yeah, it's been an interesting 6 weeks, and I'd hoped that maybe we would have kind of at least made a little bit of progress in one direction or another, but it seems we're still in the same place. I hope Lewis comes back next season. I want him to really get stuck in and have a shot at another title. I think there's a lot of, you know, the new boys coming up. George is there. The Ferraris won't stop banging on about how great that car is. So, you know, it could be an absolute melee. And if it's going to be fun and competitive, and you know, I'm going to be shouting at the TV every weekend, then bring it on. I'm here for that. But we have to make sure that that competition is fairer than it was so far. We need to get rid of the holes. We need to make sure that everyone is being treated fairly, and then we'll have a great time. So yeah, let's see where we are in March, and hopefully we'll have a great season. So yeah, throw some comments. If your opinion has changed in any of the ways since the last time you thought about it, then let me know. Always up for a bit of a debate on it. And yeah, if I see you around on Twitter, then say hi. Catch you later.